So after this conversation, we get our first painting up for auction, and it's called Nude at Daybreak. And the name of it gets Tony excited about it. But it turns out to be this cubist abstract thing. I'm not going to do justice to what it looks like. It doesn't look like a human, but that doesn't stop Jim from jumping up and saying, "My God, I know her." Jim is by far the best thing that's happened to this show. Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the next episode of Taxi. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, I'm going to give you a brief agenda here. We start off with the potent notables, which are just a couple interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the episode or series. Then I do the episode overview, which is me talking about everything that happened in the episode, so spoiler alert. And then I do the rank, where I rank the episode in 5 categories on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to find out what are the best sitcoms of all time. And today I'm going to be ranking the 22nd episode of the second season of Taxi, titled Artwork. Written by Glenn and Les Charles and directed by Jimmy Burrows. All right, well, let's find out how this one stacks up, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
So this 44th episode of Taxi was released Tuesday, March 4th, 1980. Once again, Taxi did not make it into the top 15 of the ratings, losing to both Happy Days and Three's Company in the same night. I wonder what this means for Taxi. Will they be gone from the ratings going forward, or is this just a blip? Anyway, the other potent notable is that the actors all got to pick out the artwork that they thought their character would pick. And the classical bust that Alex picks at the end of the episode is actually a bust of Homer, the classical Greek poet. But those are the potent notables. Let's go on to the episode overview. So we open the episode with Tony running into the garage, telling everybody he's got a can't miss tip on a fight. He overheard that a fighter named Johnson has got a broken hand, but he's gonna fight anyway because he needs the money. And this is gonna start us on the betting/investment plot. All the guys are gonna pitch in to bet on this fight. They even get Laka involved, which Elaine takes exception to. Now, if you recall, in the horse racing episode where Jim bought a horse, Elaine went a little crazy about gambling because her ex was a degenerate gambler. She doesn't go quite as heavy in this one. She's basically like, hey, you guys do whatever the hell you want. But Laka, he doesn't make a ton of money, and the money he does make, he sends back home to family. And on top of that, he doesn't even know what he's betting on. And then, of course, Laka proves her point when he can't say what sport he's betting on. So then Laka goes up to Alex and he's like, Alex, what would you do? And this makes Alex decide to do a Laka impression. And what's interesting about this is that I could not help but project the fact that I had this knowledge that Judd Hirsch hated Andy Kaufman. So during this whole scene, I'm just picturing Judd just hating this guy. Like, I really feel like he just wanted to shit on Andy with this impression. It wasn't great at first, but even though it felt mean-spirited, his "thank you very much" at the end did make me laugh. But what really nailed the whole thing is when Laka says, "You may laugh, but I know people who talk like that." Now, the fighter that they're all betting on is named Johnson, but as it turns out, the guy Johnson is fighting is also named Johnson, which sort of sinks their plan. Of course, Jim suggests to just pick one. I mean, you got a 50-50 shot at a sure thing that way. And then we get our first sort of odd foray into the episode here, where Elaine starts rhapsodizing about how rich people bet on sure things all the time, and it should be their turn. Then she gives Art as an example, and she's just shocked and appalled that all the guys are like, that sounds great. We'll pool our money together and you can pick a piece for us to invest in. This whole thing is weird, because she's like, no, I don't want to assign value to art. I just want to work at a gallery where we assign value to art. Also, I know what paintings will be valuable. So what's going to turn her around on this? At first, I thought Alex's 3rd grade reverse psychology was going to do the trick. He's like, I bet you didn't even know a painting that would become more valuable. And she's like, yeah, I do. Like, there's this one Duffin painting that I just know is going to gain value by the end of the year. So there. But instead of saying yes after this, she just continues to say she won't do it. I mean, it wasn't as painful as other episodes had been when they drag things out, but I just wanted to say to the writers, is there any other way that we can fill time here? And it's like they heard me, because they're like, okay, let's fill time with Alex reciting a Rudyard Kipling poem called If. Now, for those of you who've been watching me for a while here, you know that I get annoyed with Taxi and its proclivity to have long monologues that just never seem to end and aren't that funny. And that's where I thought we were headed here. But they made a good decision here. They had Jim take over the monologue and made it work, which I was so happy about. It still took too long, but having Jim do it made it funny. Either way, that's what convinces Elaine to go for it. The question is, though, how does she know that the painting is going to go up in value? Well, she knows it because the artist is on his deathbed. So as soon as he dies, the painting's value is going to skyrocket. Hearing this is what gets Louie interested because for some reason, betting on a guy's death is really appealing to him. But the gang isn't sure they want him involved. Tony is actually the first to voice it, and somehow Louie just is able to shove him right off the chair. But the gang is going to decide, let's vote. Let's get together, talk about whether we want Louie being part of this scheme or not. So obviously the most important question is the money. So they go around and they find out what everybody can contribute. Bobby and Tony say they can do $200 apiece. Elaine says she can do $250. Laka offers $350 Bratnicks. And when Alex asks how much money that is in American money, Laka goes, nothing. Elaine can do $250, and Jim says he can do $18. And when Alex asks Jim why he can't do more, Jim just goes, hey, I can buy and sell Laka. Now, the number that they needed to get to was $2,000. And Alex is like, I can't cover the rest. He blew all his money on the last ski trip. So it turns out they need Louie's money, so they decide to let him in on it. Next thing we know, they're at the auction house. Bobby comes in and he's a little awed by the art, which I thought was kind of nice. And then Elaine is like, this is worthless because they're just prints. What's your deal, Elaine? You just got through saying that you didn't want to assign value to art, but then you shit on Bobby by saying that this art that he's enjoying has no value? He didn't say, wow, look at these valuable paintings. He just said he was admiring them. Anyway, after that, Laka's gonna come in wearing a suit, which was a fun visual. We find out that Louie allowed him to come because he was supposed to fix a cab, which he didn't do and actually brought the offending part with him because he can't identify it. That's when you know you got a good mechanic. Then Jim walks in, and this visual did get me to laugh because Jim is just wearing the same outfit he always wears, except he has a tie on. And we find out that Bobby actually lent him a suit, but Jim was like, it didn't fit. Luckily, though, they both have the same tie size. So the show's gonna take us into the auction room and we're gonna see the painting, which was just some abstract stuff that looked innocuous. We get a few bits about it not being that good, and then Louie makes a crack about how they're just gonna keep the rag until the guy croaks. And then they all wanna sit in the front row, but there's only one seat left, and Louie's like, not for long. So he walks over to it and just starts hacking up a lung and eventually clears out the first 2 rows. I think this is the first time I've seen everyone in the gang actually appreciate Louie. So Elaine's got the program and she's like, oh, they think that our painting is going to go for between $1,000 and $1,800. So she was basically right, but she's a little worried that it's going to be tight. Can Louie chip in any more? Well, he can't. Why though? His money is tied up in an investment in a nursing home. Said investment is annoying to him because he thinks that they spend too much money on upkeep and there's just not enough profit. I mean, they don't need to give these seniors 3 meals a day. Oh, Louie. So after this conversation, we get our first painting up for auction, and it's called Nude at Daybreak. And the name of it gets Tony excited about it. But it turns out to be this cubist abstract thing. I'm not going to do justice to what it looks like. It doesn't look like a human, but that doesn't stop Jim from jumping up and saying, my God, I know her. Jim is by far the best thing that's happened to this show. Soon it's time for their painting, and Louie's going to do a bunch of bits about how terrible it is to try to decrease the demand for it. It doesn't work out though, as the bids keep going back and forth, with Louie getting more and more upset every time this one guy bids against them. When the guy eventually gets to $2,100 and knocks them out, he yells at him, you better hope you're not spending your twilight years at Sunset Acres, which was a fun callback to the nursing home investment. Eventually, the guy that was bidding against them does end up winning the painting for $2,900. And then right after this guy wins, after the whole auction part is done, we find out that the artist died, which just makes Louie apoplectic. But the gang is going to sit in the lobby after this and just commiserate about their loss. Jim even says he feels foolish for getting all dressed up for nothing. But before they leave though, Alex decides, I'm going to buy a piece of art. He came there to get art, so he's going to get art, even if there's no value to it. Of course, where Alex leads, the rest will follow, and they all decide to buy something, except Louie. He doesn't understand the sense in buying a print because it's worthless. Then Elaine becomes an art lover again. She just sort of pretends that she didn't say earlier that these prints weren't even worth looking at because they're worthless, and decides to condescend to Louie about him just not understanding it. Of course, that makes Louie want to buy one. It also makes Elaine kind of a hypocrite. The only person we see actually get something in the lobby is Alex, who gets a bust of a sculpted head. But in the final scene, we see Elaine walking through the garage and looking at all the different pieces of art that everybody got. Laka got a painting of the Capitol building. Tony got a painting, I think it was a painting of like a seagull. Bobby got either a painting or a blown up picture of an electrical wall outlet. Jim got a kind of abstract painting of a small black cloud centered in a sea of white clouds. And then the final joke. We see Louie walking into his office with this huge painting of a scantily clad woman. And that was the whole episode. Let's find out how it ranked.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings here, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. So the story is that the guys in the gang want to gamble on a fight, and then they end up gambling on art instead. None of it works out, but they get some art. It wasn't terrible or anything, but it wasn't great. I gave it a 2.75. So the next category is acting, and the acting was good. I thought Mary Lou Henner was a little uneven. Could have been because of the writing though, since they made her flip-flop the whole time. Anyway, not terrible, just uneven. Everyone else was fine. Nothing exceptional here, but nothing bad, so I gave it a 3.5. That brings us to dialogue. It was pretty decently funny. They actually had a really good spread of jokes, which I appreciated. Oftentimes with Taxi, the laughs are all sort of bunched up, so you get almost all your laughs in like 1 or 2 scenes, and then the rest of the episode you're like, okay. But in this one, it felt like there wasn't a scene where I didn't at least laugh once. So I gave it a 3.75. That brings us to episode coherence. I struggled with this because it felt like Elaine was contradicting herself the entire episode. We definitely didn't need the entirety of Kipling's poem recited, though it did turn out okay. We also didn't need Elaine's reticence to last as long as it did. But definitely Elaine's art shouldn't have value. Art only matters if it's valuable, which means prints suck. Actually, prints are art too stances were like whiplash. I gave it a 2.25. So that brings us to character relatability. I can certainly relate to the idea of wanting to make money easily. I like to bet every once in a while, so I get it. I could relate to where Elaine was coming from in this episode in regards to Laka gambling more than her stance on gambling in the Jim racehorse episode. Also, I think art is really fun to look for. My spouse and I have a tradition that wherever we travel to together, we try to purchase a piece of art from a local artist. So I can definitely relate to the final scene of them wanting to get something. Elaine's flip-floppiness was a little hard to take, but all in all, I thought it was a pretty decently relatable episode, so I gave it a 3.5. Okay, so the rankings were kind of low, little mixed, so we're gonna need a decent laugh counter to keep it in the top 3 tiers. Unfortunately, it got me 13 times, which is decent, but not quite decent enough, as it ended up with a 28.75, which puts it in the mediocre tier. But as for the series average, it's still going up. It's now at a 26.4, which still is in the mediocre tier, but it's still climbing. And if you're ranking along with me, please drop your score in the comments. I'd love to see where we're at here, especially the laugh counter. I'm always curious to find out if I'm laughing more or less than everybody else. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out any of my other Taxi episodes or other sitcom or movie episodes on this channel. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. For up-to-date rankings, you can check that out at therankpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankpodcast.com. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But I will leave you with this. What kind of footwear do you wear to the beach? You gotta wear your Elaine's, because she's a flip-flopper.
What a terrible joke!
Once again, Taxi did not make it into the top 15 of the ratings. Now I'm just in repeat.
Cut!
Once again, Taxi did not make it into the top 15 of the ratings, losing to both Three's Company and
Cut!
fucking motherfucker.
Cut!
Take 3.
Once again, Taxi did not make it into the top 15 of the ratings again this week. Again and again. Jesus, I'm about ready to start this fucking thing over.